Some nights when the house finally falls silent and even the ticking clock sounds too loud, I still hear echoes of voices that don't belong to me anymore. And the strangest part is not that they linger, but that I never truly wanted them to fade, because somewhere along the way I stopped being the woman who felt whole and became the woman who felt invisible. The woman who had done everything right for 12 long years, building a marriage piece by piece, brick by brick, convincing herself that loyalty was enough to keep a heart warm, until one day she realized that being faithful doesn't protect you from being lonely, that you can share a bed with someone and still feel like you're sleeping alone, that you can say "I love you" every morning and still ache for someone to actually look at you when you speak. And it didn't start with anything dramatic or deliberate. It started with small things that felt harmless at the time. A glance held a second too long, a smile that felt brighter than it should have, a laugh that reminded me what it felt like to be noticed. And I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I would never cross any line, that I was stronger than that. But I never asked myself what happens when the line docent wait for you to step over it. When it quietly moves closer and closer until you're standing on it without even realizing. Because I didn't walk into that room planning to betray anyone. I walked into it carrying a quiet emptiness. I couldn't name the kind that settles in your chest when you realize the person you married no longer really sees you, and they saw it, all of them did. They saw the way I tried too hard, the way I smiled too much, the way I lingered just a little at the edge of their conversations, and when they looked back at me, really looked, I didn't turn away. I told myself it was just attention, just harmless validation, but deep down I knew it was more than that. It was proof that I still existed as something more than a routine, more than a background character in my own life. Because once upon a time, I loved hearing Mark laugh with his friends, loved the noise, the chaos, the feeling that our home was alive. I used to prepare everything with care, snacks arranged perfectly, candles lit, wanting him to feel proud of the life we had built, wanting us to look like the couple we used to be. But now their laughter feels like a reminder of everything that's missing. 12 years since I said yes to forever, and forever starts to feel unbearably long when you're lonely inside it. Mark used to look at me like I was the only thing in the room. Now he looks at screens, at schedules, at everything except me. And even when he sits right beside me, I feel like I'm sitting alone, telling myself he still loves me, while knowing that love without presence feels like absence in disguise. And then there's me. Not old, not young, just stuck in between the woman I was and the woman I've become, the one who manages the house, the bills, the smiles, the dinners where he barely looks up while his friends come over every Friday night, poker night. What used to be a shared tradition and now feels like his escape and my performance. Because I cook, I serve, I smile, and when I step into the kitchen, I hear them laughing without me, sharing stories I no longer belong to, and yet sometimes I catch their eyes lingering, Not rude, not obvious, just enough to remind me I'm still visible to someone. And our home, beautiful on the outside, feels like a cage on the inside. Warm walls, framed photos of people who look happy but feel like strangers. Everything perfect for the world, everything cold for me, so I kept playing my role. Perfect wife, perfect hostess, hiding the ache behind practiced expressions until one ordinary night, something shifted, nothing dramatic, just a different kind of look in their eyes, something more aware, more curious, something that mirrored a hunger I had tried so hard to ignore, and I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not to impress, not to provoke. I told myself just to remember myself a blouse that fit a little better, lipstick I hadn't worn in months, perfume that used to make Mark notice, and when the doorbell rang and they walked in with their familiar laughter, I felt something flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with hospitality, and Mark barely noticed me, already distracted. Already halfway gone, but they did, and I felt their attention like warmth after a long winter, and I should have stepped back, should have kept my distance. But instead, I leaned into it in small, quiet ways, a softer voice, a slower movement, a longer pause when our eyes met, and I told myself it was harmless, just being seen, just being human, but the room felt different, heavier, charged with things no one said out loud, and when Mark eventually drifted into sleep and they asked me to stay just for a drink, just to talk, I hesitated for a heartbeat that felt like a lifetime. Knowing I should leave, knowing I should choose the safe path. But loneliness can be louder than logic, and I stayed, sitting there with them, feeling their eyes, feeling my own heart beat faster for reasons I didn't want to admit. And when someone said I deserved more attention, I laughed it off. But the words settled deep inside me. Because for the first time in years, someone had acknowledged the part of me that still wanted to feel desired. Not as a wife, not as a role, just as a woman, and I kept telling myself I wasn't doing anything wrong, no one was touching, no one was crossing any obvious boundary. But sometimes the most dangerous lines are the invisible ones, the ones drawn inside your own mind, and by the time Mark stirred awake and I excused myself, I could feel their gazes following me, and the worst part wasn't the guilt, it was that I didn't hate it. I wanted it, and the next week I knew exactly why I was choosing certain clothes, why I wore my hair differently, why I felt that quiet thrill when the doorbell rang, because this time it wasn't just them watching me, it was me hoping they would end. When Mark left the room for a call and the silence fell around us, thick and uncertain, I felt that familiar pull between what I should do and what I wanted to feel. And when someone joked about wanting to watch me dance, I should have refused immediately, should have laughed and walked away. But instead I hesitated, and in that hesitation I learned something terrifying about myself, that sometimes betrayal doesn't begin with a touch. It begins with a moment where you choose not to stop, where you let yourself be seen in a way you know you shouldn't. And I told myself it was still innocent, still harmless, just movement, just glances. But when I felt their attention wrap around me like a current, when I heard my own breath change, when I realized how alive I felt in that moment compared to how empty I felt in my own marriage, I knew something had shifted inside me. And when Mark came back, and nothing was said when everyone pretended everything was normal, I lay in bed later staring at the ceiling, telling myself nothing had happened, while knowing that something had, because ever since then the fantasies came uninvited, in quiet moments, in reflections, in spaces where Mark's absence felt louder than his presence. And I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Had I already crossed the line, even if nothing physical ever happened? Had I betrayed him simply by wanting to be wanted, by letting my heart answer questions my mouth never spoke? And the truth is, I don't know anymore. I don't know when loyalty turned into silence, when longing turned into temptation, when being watched started to feel like breathing again. And that's what scares me most. Not that I might lose my marriage, but that I might have already lost myself somewhere between who I was and who I've become. A woman standing in a beautiful house, surrounded by people, yet aching for connection, wondering if the real betrayal isn't in what we do, but in what we allow ourselves to feel, in the quiet yes we whisper inside when we know we should be saying no.